Welcome to the meeting. It's 5:30. I'll call us to order. That was a wimpy little couch. I do want to say, before we get started, just acknowledge that we lost someone today. We lost the Boone County Fire Protection District Assistant Fire Chief, Matthew Tobin, and we send our condolences to his coworkers and his family and the community that left him. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Looks like Alvin got the second. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? It looks like the agenda has been adopted.
Okay, she asked to approve the agenda.
We're going to have to speak up because we
We'll
have
have to speak up for
microphones.
him because there's no microphone.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is my turn this month to read the equity statement. Is that better volume? Okay. If anyone feels like I'm shouting, I'm not trying to. Columbia Public Schools, through action and in partnership with families and community, will uphold the values, policies, and practices that promote cultural competence. We will accept, embrace, and empower students and staff in their individual identities to establish and sustain human dignity, justice, and equitable treatment and inclusiveness in the classroom and workplace. So I am also the board responder this month. If you send an email to the full board, it'll be me that responds just for this month. And before we get started with public comment, I want to also acknowledge our executive directors in the back. Hello, thank you for being here. See what you think if this is an entertaining way to spend a Monday night. You can let us know after. No, thank you for being here. We appreciate your work always. We have one member of the public giving public comment tonight. It is Chris Jones. Ms. Jones, if you'd like to come forward, you will have 3 minutes.
And I realize it will have to be on my phone.
Who's counting me down so I know where to look?
I will do it. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. When we're away from home, it's all these things you don't think about. Let me get you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Jones. I frequently attend meetings all across Missouri. And last month, I yet again attended the Columbia Public Schools board meeting, and I was highly disappointed. And I went away and I posted on social media, and I'm about ready to read part of the statement that I wrote in one of the local forums. If anyone ever thought you needed high school algebra beyond high school, you're wrong. CPS has out $300,000 in student lunch debt. CPS has approximately 19,000 students. CPS students attend approximately 9 months of school per year. CPS gets approximately $13,900 per student per year. This means we have enough facts to find the average debt per student per school year per month. We have enough facts to find the percent of debt per student compared to how much money CPS receives in funds per student. Please note, average is different than mean. We do not have enough information at this moment to give the mean. $300,000 in debt divided by 19,000 enrolled students equals an average debt of $15.79 per student in CPS per year. $15.79 per average debt per student per year divided by 9, approximate number of months the students go to school per year, excluding summer school, equals $1.74. Average debt per month the average student accumulates, $1.74, that's it. Now we're going to divide by $13,900, the average amount CPS receives per student by the average amount of debt per student per year. This gives us the ratio of how many dollars we get per average student per dollar of debt accumulated in food debt. $13,900 divided by $15.79, which means for every $1 of food debt, CPS receives $880.30 in tax funding from federal, state, and local sources. If we do the inverse of this, we would get for every dollar CPS receives in funding, how much food debt students accumulate. Again, we're talking averages. $15.79 divided by 13,900 equals $0.00113597. That's right. CPS accumulates approximately 1/10 of a cent in student food debt per $1 they receive in overall budget. Now, CPS doesn't turn away hungry students. They just send their parents to collections if they can't pay. Now, let's think about who might not be able to pay for school lunches. Kids caught in the gap where their parents make too much money, but they're still barely able to survive. Kids whose parent just lost a job.
Time. Sorry. Thank you.
I will be sending the rest of this, because I was told that you guys did not have the math that was not presented last month, and it is disgusting how much you guys are sending to
Time.
collection.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Sorry, we do keep to time so that it's consistently fair for everybody. You're welcome to send anything. Anyone is welcome to send anything to the full board, and we will review that. Thank you. Moving on to our president's report. We're going to discuss just a little bit about the special education task force that we agreed to create at the retreat. Since the retreat, Ms. Farrow and I met, and we went over some possible objectives, which I shared with the board and Dr. Yearwood over email. And this is just a chance for us to kind of talk about that a little bit informally. We don't need to have a motion or anything on this. It's just discussion. But April, if you want to kind of go over do you want to go over any of the objectives or how we got there, or do you want me to do that part? We talked about the timeline.
So the way we got there was the Special Education Advisory Committee that Dr. Yearwood has sent out a survey to all families with IEPs, and we took that data and we tried to look at consistencies in that, and so we came up with our objectives based on those areas where there seemed to be consistency, where parents wanted more information, needed more clarity, and we're going to be sending out a interest request form to all families with IEPs and 504s in the district to ask if they are interested in being on this task force that we are creating. The survey should go out July 15th. There should also be reminders that go out for anyone who missed the first email with a deadline of August 1st, and we will work on identifying people for that committee, with ideally the first meeting being early to mid-September. The idea is to have a good representation of families that have 504s, IEPs, families that have students in small contained classrooms, families that have students in regular ed for the majority of the time and everything in between, families in preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school. We also welcome any staff members at buildings that have students that fall into this category to also express their interest, and we'd also like a wide demographic and a good representation as much as possible from a lot of different areas of town and different schools. And so that's where we're at with that, and I'm going to let you articulate the rest because you do it better than me.
I don't know about that. So again, what we're aiming for with the objectives is to address parent concerns, not curriculum, not anything that should be more staff or admin directed, but just try to get some more information from families based on their survey responses, and task them with coming up with some solutions that they perceive to issues that they perceive. So we kind of discussed having the task force objectives be threefold. Recommend communication that would improve the experience of families receiving special services. Make suggestions to streamline and improve the evaluation process. And identify a consistent interpretation of FERPA for district-wide application that adheres to federal law. Those are pretty concrete objectives, which is how a task force is supposed to run. It's supposed to be pretty targeted, and once the objectives have been met, then the task force dissolves. So like April said, we're gonna solicit input or interest in participating from parents and or guardians of students with IEPs or 504s, and then kind of let them run with these objectives. We are open to ideas or suggestions from other board members or input from administration to consider. So if anyone has that, this is the time.
No, yeah, I appreciate y'all coming together and kind of, since our retreat and working on it and sharing these there. For me, some of looking at the draft objectives that y'all have here, some of it has some value-laden statements in it, and it's not that that's like a negative thing, but just thinking about how can we have objectives that are not value-laden and saying that like to improve or anything like that, just so that when the task force is working, they might pinpoint preferred means of communication that like we already do, right? And so like that's not an improvement, but there can be a reconfirmation of like that preferred, that type of communication is preferred still, right? In that sort of way. And so that's sort of kind of where I look at it from that standpoint. I think the other piece of it from that too, of not having a value-laden statement from the board, is that it allows those that are on the task force to really frame how they're sharing, whether it is recommendations, preferences, options, however they get to that. I think that's where it is. And so I know I had shared this at a conversation President Waters with you of who I should share it with. You know, you said you and Ms. Frau. Frau.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
You got it.
And so it's the same one. I feel like it hits the same things, but it's just a little bit different in wording. And so how it kind of goes is like that first one goes, investigate and list preferred communications for families receiving services. The second one is investigate and list preferred evaluation processes throughout the state and nation. And then the third one being investigate and list preferred interpretations of FERPA that are applied district-wide in different districts across the state and nation, and really giving them that scope of work that's wide, and also giving in the objective a very stated way of what we're wanting, like what we're wanting to see in comparison, right? Because I think there's one piece of this where we can have ideas and that's generated there, but what's also would be good to see is if we're able to see what are other districts doing as they're looking at that information and where they're pulling from that, so that we can also have some examples to base off of what any changes we might want to make, right? Because if we know that this practice is happening in one district, whether it's here in the state or another state, we're able to reach out to those districts and we're able to ask, like, how does that work? How do you all do that? If that's something that we would want to do and move into. So that's one piece of some just minor alterations of the objectives as they're worded. My second thing is I am a little concerned just with objective 2 and 3 really have a lot to do with staff too, and how staff work with families. When we're talking about the evaluation process, when we're talking about how FERPA gets applied and applied district-wide, but also applied by our staff, right? And so I feel weird those being two specific objectives and staff that work directly with our kids in special services not being able to be a part of that conversation. And so one thing I understand from what we talked about in our retreat, the reason for wanting to not have staff on this task force, I get that reasoning behind it. And so maybe when it comes to if 2 and 3 remain as objectives, that maybe we have a separate task force that is our staff that work in special services providing feedback too on those 2 objectives, so that we can have that together. So it's just one, as I was kind of thinking around all of this from that kind of standpoint. So yeah.
I think, if we need to, we can rework some of the wording. The wording about number 2, and I understand what you're saying about where it says make suggestions to streamline and improve the evaluation process. We kind of came up from that looking at the special education survey, and there were several questions in there related to the evaluation process, and that indicated there's some improvement needed, which is why we used that word. And these items on here that further clarify that have to do with more things that were specific in the survey itself. And I think what I envision with this is the parents will discuss, the different things that, are the obstacles with the evaluation process, and perhaps some suggestions. But I think that ultimately it is administration and the special services department who's going to have to take that information and decide, logistically we can do this, logistically we can't do this, here's the timeline for that. And you're right, I mean, it does ultimately impact a lot of staff. Of course, Dr. Yearwood also has his special education advisory task force that has like 17 staff members on it, and they'll be very well situated to be able to address anything that kind of comes out of this. I think that the thing about a task force is, they provide recommendations to the board and feedback to the board, and then we have to decide, what pieces of that that we feel we can move forward with, and there might be things that we can't move forward with, or they just might not make sense in the overall structure that we have, or the size of our district, or anything like that. I think, also as you mentioned, looking at some of what different districts do. I mean, I do think that's something that, maybe that's an instruction for the task force, I mean, I think, in my mind, that's kind of a given, but, that's not always something that someone else will think, so I think that's, it's fair to say, we don't want to just, we don't want to recreate the wheel from, something, and you find best practices in different areas and things like that. So that's kind of, I probably addressed some of it. I'm not sure. With FERPA, we just know that from the FERPA aspect, there seems to be a lot of different uses or interpretations to different groups of families. We hear that a lot, especially from special education families. And so I think it's just important that maybe the idea is, not only what that interpretation is, but what is the clear understanding. When we're writing a policy, I can write all kinds of legal words and legal jargon, but if our people who need to look and see how that policy applies to them can't understand what that policy means, maybe some of this is kind of helping form what clear communication, clear language surrounding that would be, and make sure that it's applied equally. It's a consistent messaging throughout the district, regardless of which school you go to, regardless of which classroom you're in. It's just consistent messaging, whatever that message is,
Paul, did you have anything that you wanted to add? This was kind of one of your original ideas. So sorry to pick on you.
That's okay. I'm in brain fog right now, so.
I'm sorry.
While I agree that the objectives probably can be written just a little bit tighter, I do like that list, and I do think they are good objectives for what we're talking about.
Okay.
The one thing that I would probably add is that in the original plan, I know we talked about the advisory committee looking at our overall special education plan. most states that actually, I know that at least Michigan, I believe it is, that has special education advisory committees as a law. That's one of the objectives that they do, is they have the parents look it over so that there is less disagreement between the parents and the administration about how the district is fulfilling its obligations under IDEA.
Are you talking about the local compliance plan?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're talking about the parents, the task force taking a look at the local compliance plan as well as the advisory committee?
Well, I don't, that's what I'm suggesting, is that was sort of part of the original mix. I don't know how that fits in, but that might be a good use for this task force or another task force to do that review.
Okay,
Yeah, one of our original, when
That's fair.
Paul and I mean,
Yeah.
we started working on this in January. And so when we first started working on this, one of the ideas is, I believe, we have a special education plan that is due to DESE by October or something like that. And, you know, it's gonna be September before the first meeting of this task force meets. But one of the conversations that Paul and I had, not for parents to go in and change the plan, but for parents to be able to work with the district, understand the plan, provide maybe some guidance or maybe some changes that might need to be made, not with the intent of changing processes, but changing for clarity, different things like that. And so that was one of the original conversations, but again, while I think that it could be worthwhile and something to look at, I think given the timing, like I said, we were looking at this in January, and this thing is due in October, and we're proposing this first meeting not happen until September. And I believe we normally approve that plan as a board either in the August or September meeting.
okay.
So,
I totally agree that it can't happen in the timeframe that you're talking about.
for this task force this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Yearwood, do you know if your special education advisory committee is planning to meet in August or September?
Yes, when we get back and we get school running, it'll probably be early September, because school starts on what, the 20th, something like that. So we'll get school done and get our meetings out of the way, and then we'll start back up with the committee. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, I mean, maybe that's something that could be handled in that way that year, but are you holding up your card? Just playing with it?
I can say something if you want me to.
Yeah, you don't
I mean,
have to.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about consistency, whether it's, I think the verbiage is gonna be what it is, but the goals are gonna be the same regardless of how we write them. We want to make sure that we're consistent with our communication to our families. We wanna make sure that we're consistent in our evaluation of our students, and we wanna make sure that we're consistent with how we're interpreting FERPA. I mean, that's all we're really talking about here, is making sure that we're doing it the same way for every student, every time, for every family, every time, and that we're staying legal. Because if we're not staying legal, then,
That's a problem.
things
Bigger
get
fish.
weird, yeah.
I
So-
do want to just make sure that everyone understands that because this is a task force, as part of the board and a function of the board, it does also have to comply with sunshine law, which means we will have to have agendas, we will have to have it noticed up, and it'll have to be open. So just for people to understand that that would be part of the process as well, and certainly part of, if anyone is on the committee, they should know that, just in case they're not comfortable in being in a public meeting.
And the goal is to work themselves out of the job.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
No, you're fine. I was just holding this up because I know that I had already, like, on my green one, Brian,
No,
raised
but
his
you-
hand. You haven't talked yet, I've
Oh,
talked
I'm
once.
sorry, I didn't-
Okay.
I
No,
filled
no,
the
I
card.
just did 2
Okay.
seconds ago, yeah.
Okay.
I did look that way.
Yeah, no, you good. First of all, I commend you all for, wanting to establish a task force that brings our parents in. We know that that's a critical part of the educational process of our scholars, that parent voice. And definitely, we are always going to be open and welcome to learning and hearing about how we can get stronger and better as a school district. It's a process, and we want to get better. We want to get stronger.
Great, well, it takes a team, so that's what we're doing. Go ahead, Blake.
No, yeah. I was, Ms. Ferrari, you commented on the fact that like some were this objective, not some.
Yes.
The objective being informed by the survey,
Yeah,
things like
right,
that.
right.
I think, and I had shared with y'all around like maybe our stated objectives not having those
Right.
listed out, and I just wanted to
Right, you
comment on
had
that.
a better, a clearer and
Look at us. We're
concise.
Sorry, y'all.
Do we need a manager for this?
Compressed,
Setting
I
up-
didn't write these, so
I
I'm
got
not
you.
the wordy one.
No, you're fine. I wanted to say, the only reason why I feel like I agree with you, any task force that was gonna look at that is probably gonna pinpoint like those things
That's
that
true.
are there. And
Right.
some of it is, I don't want the task force to feel
Prescriptive.
boxed in on, it's just
Just
those,
those.
because I don't
I
like
see
what we
what you're
need,
saying. Mhm.
right? And so I think if we leave it as confined but broad in our objective as possible, it allows the task force really to talk, go through things and talk through that stuff. I will say objective 2 and 3, I hear exactly what you're saying around like staff is gonna be the ones that apply anything if we were to make any changes. I think what could be good, whether it's in tandem or it's later on before a finalized
Oh, yeah.
report comes in, staff being able to talk to that group after reviewing kind of what they have there just to help streamline a little bit of things, because my concern, right, would be that task force creates something for us, it gets presented to the board, and then a year later, we talk through things and it's like 50% of that's not possible.
Right.
And folks that were on that task force feel like, well, why was that never brought up
Right,
before
right,
we
right,
did it?
right.
Because they might have been able to make alterations to what they were gonna
Right, what
highlight.
their plan
in-
or thoughts were.
Yeah, in that kind of
Yeah.
recommendation. So that's kind of, that's just, it's for 2 and 3. 2 and 3 just really are like, there is an integral piece
Yes.
of this where staff exists. And that's just sort of, I just wanna make sure that we're not feeling, like we're not spinning our wheels on something that ends up having to be nixed or like set up to where it's an alteration without like them being a part of the conversation, what an alteration could look like before it got to being recommended to the board.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, and this is more of a process kind of thing, I know that we said July 15th is gonna be that first email, August 1st is that deadline for interest, we're looking at September to be that first meeting. When are we planning on approving the objectives?
The task force objectives?
Yeah,
I wasn't planning on having a vote on
Okay.
the objectives. We're just having discussion on the objectives.
okay.
Yeah, because at the retreat, we just kind of agreed that you and I would work on this, come up with whatever, informed, we didn't just pluck things out of the sky.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, so I wasn't planning to have
Okay.
a formal vote on it. So the way I see this kind of working is the task force, they meet, they come up with their thoughts, and then they share those with the board, but not for the board to then determine, like, this is what we're gonna do,
Yeah.
but just because we're kind of the go-between, and then we share it with administration, who shares it with staff, and then they tell us, this is what we can do, this is what this is impossible for whatever reason, this is what we can do, we can't do this, but we could do this, and then that information goes back to the task force, because I do think we need to complete the loop, and then, at some point, maybe the 2 advisory groups come together, I don't actually
I got
Well,
you.
have like the end,
Right.
the last meeting is gonna be this day, and this is what they're gonna
So,
decide.
yeah,
but-
so just to process, could I ask a couple more questions of
Yep.
that process, the timeline? Because I
So
think
that
it
was
will
my
help
question,
of stuff.
so is there an end date, and when's the first time that is the board gonna hear kind of on progress?
I know that.
9 months is kind of task force, like end of the school year is kind of
So May,
the,
June?
that's kind of the
Typical.
typical timeline, or earlier if they meet the objectives earlier.
And we talked about potentially getting an update from them. I believe we kind of talked about the February meeting.
I think so.
And so getting now we may get information from them before that, but I'm talking about like they come to the meeting and give us a presentation,
You wrote out
that kind of
timeline.
thing.
Where is that?
It's in my brain.
Oh, okay.
July 15th is the survey goes out. We send out another reminder on July 22nd. We send another reminder on July 31st, reminding people that it closes on August 1st. We meet, meet with, I think it was you, me, and Paul. We're gonna go through all the responses and kind of try to narrow down my survey or my interest form. Asks for name, what school their child's at, what level their child is in, race, if they are a parent, if they are both a parent and a staff member, because we want to get a wide variety of people, if they have an IEP, if they have a 504, what kind of placement their child has, if it's small to contained classroom or 4079, or you know, if it's just a 504, that question won't apply. And so try to get a broad range there.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I want to apologize. I thought about this of asking questions around timeline as we've been talking, and so that's why I didn't, that wasn't emailed to y'all, so I'm sorry about that.
That's fine.
No, that's fine.
In that, are we, so as y'all are narrowing down from those that are of the interest form in similar ways, is the whole board approving that slate that y'all end up presenting to us, or is it just y'all narrowing down and then telling us? And
One of the things you did mention was about sharing it with the slate with administration.
Yes. I'm
So
fine with sharing it with
Yeah.
the board and then.
and getting feedback if
Yeah,
there's.
I don't
you
want
know,
to vote on the slate, but I
Okay.
think sharing and.
Getting any, you know,
And same
pertinent
with
feedback would be helpful.
administration, like, you know, I think it's fair to share with administration and just, you know, make sure everybody kind of knows what's going on.
good. And I'm just asking questions just to kind of know in my brain kind of
Oh, yeah.
stamps and stuff like that.
Mhm.
When it comes to who their chair is, are we gonna be allowing just the committee, like how other committees make that, like with the city, right? The city's commissions and the committees, they vote on their own chairs and vice chairs and things like that. Are we going to allow that committee to vote on their own chair?
Undetermined.
Okay. When it
I mean,
comes-
you're right, that's,
April and I have had a discussion with someone, but not something that we could share in public quite yet.
or
Or,
solidified.
and it's not solidified.
It's definitely not solidified.
No,
Okay.
so,
In that, so there's that got asked timeline-wise. I know you guys talked about an update on those kind of spaces, looking at February and then May and June. Is there a way for, when it comes to those that are interested or will read that and be interested, how are we explaining the time commitment and timeline of stuff? So are they, just so that they know what they're expecting, I'm assuming what we're meaning by this is that more than likely you're gonna be meeting once a month from September to May or June. I'm assuming you're looking at maybe like a 2-hour meeting in that month. Are we providing food? Are we providing transportation? I just making sure that those things are answered in that interest so that people do know what they're signing up for, so that we don't end up selecting and then someone not being able to participate because of us not explaining what could be barriers that exist.
Right, and time of day also, which, I mean, for me, I was initially thinking, you know, something after 5:30, after the traditional work day, because we might be pretty limited if we tell everyone it's gonna be at noon.
Yeah, right.
On Monday.
And you know, and this may be where it goes, like only certain ones are in person, the rest are over Zoom to make it easier, right? I think there,
Right,
just so that
absolutely,
we
there's
can
could be,
explain
Yeah.
that information out well, what that plan is, I
Thank
think would
you.
be really good. Yeah, I think the only other thing, I mean, on the updates, I would, in some ways, I lean into letting the task force tell us give their own metrics of when they think they could give us an update.
yeah, I mean,
Right, and
I
again, asking
agree.
for February, May, and June, but I think maybe it is if they're meeting in September, right, maybe it is by November, they give us
Right.
notice of, here's when we believe that we will have metrics to come
Mhm.
present.
Mhm.
And then that way it's it's continually in their hands, right?
Right.
And that it's still us asking for an update. I think having an end of year update of saying that like you're at least gonna share where you are at on those metrics that you shared with us, right? If they say like, we're 50% there. Sorry, we haven't given you a full report, we're still doing this. Great, that's good to know, right? But I think giving them that ownership of metrics and all that stuff makes it to where that continued investment of having it done, whether it's in a year or a year and a half or whatever.
Right, right. No, I think that's all really good suggestions, especially the expectation of, you know, time commitment and,
Yeah,
you
I'll
know,
add that to
that
the
type of stuff. And also, like you said, I mean, we were just, you know, February just kind of fell out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not married to February, and I do think that is driven by the task force. And they may prefer to give us updates more often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for the input, everybody. We'll keep working on this. And now for the superintendent's report, the first thing is our attendance area update.
Yes, and as Mr. Oldfield is working his way to the podium there, lots of work, lots of input. I think this was one of our most smoothest processes. I know that Mr. Lyman, thank you so for leading the charge or helping us with the charge there. And I think that because of this entire process, it has been very, very smooth. And Mr. Oldfield, Mr. Gooch also, along with Karen, thank you for your expertise. So take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Good evening, Board President Waters, Vice President Lyman, rest of the board members, and Dr. Yearwood. First, I want to say thank you guys for being flexible today as we're doing major upgrades in our board meeting, and we had to use this space. So thank you for being flexible with us today. So we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to invite Karen Jackson up, our consultant with Woodport, to walk us through how we're going to, how we got to where we're at today with offering a recommendation for you guys to vote on tonight. So Karen.
You got it, Noah? Awesome. All right. So we're going to start tonight by just going through a little blast from the past. We're going to kind of see where we've been and where we're going. So this is our overall planning process. You have seen this chart probably 30 times by now. We are at our recommendation point. We do run a very iterative process, which you will see later on. We have looked at lots of versions of maps to get to where we are, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from community members and other stakeholders. I'm trying to.
It's okay.
I brought this for the laser pointer. I just want to do a quick reminder of the attendance area change guidelines. This is part of a review of enrollment trends. The attendance area should anticipate future growth of neighborhoods. Walkability and bikeability is important, but not always feasible. The attendance area seeks to reflect the composition of the CPS community as much as possible. The board recognizes the power of a school to create a community, and accessibility for families is very important. We had to consider the time students spend on the bus and the distance traveled to and from school. We wanted to consider attendance boundary lines that follow natural and man-made boundaries, and then consider a transfer policy that allows some of our incoming students to remain at their previous school, should that be feasible. So, next slide. All right. So this slide just shows kind of our full community and committee engagement. Starting with our focus group. So way back, I think in January, we had about 10 or more different focus groups. We had 236 folks apply to be a member of focus groups. We had 61 community members who were assigned to a focus group. And they provided feedback on attendance area change themes. They did not see any options, but they kind of told us where they want to go with this kind of process. So we used that feedback to create our initial boundary options, those 5 options, or yeah, our 5, well, first our phase 1 changes, but of course our 5 initial options later on. So next up, we did go through our phase 1 process. That was kind of a process within the process. If you remember, we had 3 different options, and we recommended moving forward with option 1. So as with all of the maps you've seen since that point, that is going to be included in that. After phase 1, the committee reviewed 8 different options for phases 2 and 3 and provided the feedback we needed to narrow that down to 5. So we went to the community and got feedback on our initial 5 options. We had over 2,200 responses. on that one, and you can see the level of support. That's that top right image. We then took the feedback back to the committee and reviewed it, and we asked them for feedback on what options and changes are needed to move forward in the process, which gave us our final 3 options, or final kind of like 2.5-ish options. It was really 2 groups of options. The A options and the B options were very similar. As you can see, I don't think we went through this as a group, but I did send you the results. The A options kind of came out on top, and those were the options that did not change any high school attendance areas, and we had over 1,100 responses. I do want to note that's pretty common. Once we kind of narrow down the changes and keep it kind of condensed on what we're actually changing rather than kind of opening up the whole world to changes, we do usually see a drop-off in community engagement. So, after we had our 4 final options, we took the committee through the results of that, and they provided feedback on a couple of potential modifications that were left. And this last graph on the bottom right shows the level of support by the committee for our A option recommendation. So you can see 57% of our committee members that responded were in support of the recommendation, 36 were neutral, and then 7% did not support. Next slide, let me do that. So here are all of our maps. So like I said earlier, we started on the left with our focus groups. From that, we created 8 different scenarios that we took to the committee. Those were then narrowed down to the 5 initial options. From there, we had community and committee feedback, which were narrowed down to 4 different options. Then we had our 2 options that the committee kind of went through a couple weeks ago, and with that, go ahead and change it. This is our final recommendation. It is a modified version of the A option, so the options that do not touch the high school attendance areas, with a couple different areas either left alone or changed based on feedback we either heard from the community or feedback from the committee. So go ahead and go to the next slide. These are all of our metrics for the recommendation. This is very similar charts as you've seen before. On the left, we have our 26-27 capacities. So these are the capacities once the additions are completed at the elementary schools and the new Southwest Elementary School is complete. We then have our live-in enrollment. This is including all the students at that level, so in the elementary school, K through 5, that live within that attendance zone, not necessarily those who are transferring out. The live-in utilization is just the enrollment divided by the capacity. We then have our diversity metrics, so the diversity index, the low socioeconomic, that's the percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch. The EL percentage, that's the percentage of students receiving English as a second language services, and then the IEP percentage, that's those who are on IEPs. Then we have our 2028-29 utilization, so 5 years out, using these attendance areas, that's kind of what we're projecting at each school. At the elementary level, you can see we are in great shape. All of our schools are right in line with where we want them to be. At the middle school, we do have a couple of tighter spots, especially in that Southwest corridor, because the feedback was overwhelming. We want to maintain those 100% feeders from middle to high school, and we are not touching the high school attendance areas. Those Southwest corridor middle schools are going to remain, or are going to be kind of tight. That is the biggest change. We're definitely relieving Gentry Middle School, so they will get the relief they need, but John Warner will come up from about 71% to be up in the 90s. It's important to note with the middle school attendance areas, the percentages you see on there are including all the students that live in, so not the students that go to Jeff. So at any given school, you can subtract about 5 to 8% of that population ending up going to Jefferson Middle School. Looking on the far right, I don't believe the community has seen these metrics before. The first one is the live-in enrollment, those who live within the walk zone. So the elementary school, that's 1 mile, middle and high school, that's 2 miles. We then have the percentage of students who are walkable from each school. So you can see that percentage there, that's just that previous column divided by the enrollment. And then the average distance to school. So for every student that lives within that attendance area, that is the average distance that is traveled to school. Something to note about transportation as well. all but about 130 students total, K through 12, will. Oh, no, it's not in that one. Sorry, I needed to conserve space. It's just in the presentation. Yeah. All but about 130 students, K through 12, live within a 15-minute drive to the school in which they're assigned. The exception being the schools that are kind of out in the country with very, very large attendance areas. I'm talking like a West Boulevard or Midway Heights.
Hey Karen, that last column, average distance to school, what's the measurement?
That is in miles.
Miles, okay.
Based on, it's not as a crow flies, it's based on the actual road network that they would have to travel to get to that building. In looking at our feeders, elementary to middle school, we have made great strides in improving these. Right now, we have two elementary schools that split into 3 different middle schools with 11 splits total from elementary to middle. We are reducing that down to 6. And every split you can see is within kind of our green range, so at least 70-30 split. Middle to high school feeders, again, we are keeping those 100%. Looking at our students move, these numbers are lower than any option that we presented. So that's a positive. And those who attend closest school, for the most part, these numbers haven't changed drastically from what currently is happening. It's like 1 or 2 percentage points. Next slide. So if you remember, we do have phase 2 changes that will occur in 25-26, and then phase 3 changes that will occur in 26-27. For the most part, the phase 2 changes are occurring on the east side of 63. So Blue Ridge, Derby Ridge, Shepherd, Battle, Elementary, all of those will receive their changes in phase 2, as well as a small portion of New Haven will be pushed into Rockbridge in phase 2. Phase 3 is really focused on the Southwest Corridor with a couple changes just north of the Southwest Corridor as well, to kind of balance those enrollments once the new Southwest Elementary School opens. Next one. So I am going to be going through each of the change areas individually, so bear with me here. This first area is moving from Derby Ridge Elementary to Alpha Hart Elementary, and this first set of changes is occurring in phase 2. So I'm not gonna read each of the neighborhood names because some of these lists get pretty extensive, but you can kind of get an idea of the area that we're moving. Again, this is Derby Ridge to Alpha Hart. Next slide. Okay, this one's kind of complicated, so I have my laser pointer. Is it gonna work? Maybe not. Okay.
It's faint. Yeah, I can see it, but it's pretty faint.
On the far left, that little parcel goes to Alpha Hart Lewis.
Is it this?
Yeah, they would be moving to west. Nobody lives, we don't have any current students living there. It is just a strange outcut parcel. We're just correcting it. The same goes for these other changes that are moving from Alpha Hart Lewis to Parkade. Nobody lives here today, but we are making the change in an attempt to kind of have nice cleaner lines that follow areas. It just doesn't make sense. Next one. This next area is another very small area. This is moving from West Boulevard to Parkade. It's about 5 parcels and there are no students impacted, but we wanted to maintain that Creasy Springs Road corridor. Next one. All right, so this one includes 2 changes. First from Blue Ridge to Derby Ridge, and then Oakland Middle School to Lang Middle School. So the middle school changes in this case are to maintain that nice feeder pattern. If you look, you can see that this area is directly east of Lang Middle School. That little orange dot is Lang Middle School, so this one felt nice. They're very close. Next one. Same idea here. This area is moving from Blue Ridge Elementary to Derby Ridge and Oakland Middle School to Lang Middle School. Again, we wanted to maintain those nice feeders. That is the reason for the middle school change. Next one. All right, so this is the area on the far south side of Blue Ridge's Elementary. This will be moved to Shepherd Boulevard, and you can see there's a whole list of neighborhoods moved. And just something to note, all of the neighborhood names came directly from the parcel data set that the county provided. I did not make these up. Some of them are strange, so. Next one. All right, this area up here is moving from Lang Middle School to Oakland Middle School. Again, this is one of those feeder things. Shepherd currently has a 3-way feeder split. They feed into 3 separate middle schools. By moving this from Lang to Oakland, we now have just 2, a 2-way feeder split for Shepherd. Next. All right, there's kind of a lot going on in this one. We'll start at the far left. That is moving from Shepherd Boulevard to Alpha Hart Lewis. There is a small development in there that is currently split. The development didn't exist the last time we did this, so we're just making that change before any students show up there. Up at the top, we have an area that's moving from Alpha Hart Lewis to 2 Mile Prairie. We had a lot of feedback from this area that it's one neighborhood and they would like to go to school together, and 2 Mile also wanted more students, so it was kind of an easy win-win right there. And then on the bottom, so this is one of the areas that was moved during the last process. They were moved from Battle to Alpha Hart Lewis. In this case, they will be moved back to Battle Elementary. I really do feel for these families that live here. I think if we had known that the Battle addition was going to occur 4 years ago when we did this process, we would not have made this change. Unfortunately, there was not space at the time at Battle Elementary. I'm really hoping for this community that is their permanent home. Next one. All right, we got a little bit going on here. So both of the red boxes in this case are moving from Shepherd to Battle Elementary. And then the box, the L-looking box on the left, is moving from Oakland to Lang. Again, that is a feeder. That is a feeder change. Next. All right, so this area right here that's outlined is moving from Shepherd Boulevard to Cedar Ridge, and you can see that it's a long list of neighborhood names. It doesn't impact as many students as neighborhoods that it seems. Next. So this is the only change that occurs in phase 2 on the other side of 63. This area is moving from New Haven to Rockbridge. New Haven is approaching overutilization, so we had to relieve them in the short term. They will get more relief in phase 3, but this is trying to get them the relief they need in the short term so that by 26, 27, when phase 3 goes into effect, they're in a good place. Next one. All right. So this area right here is moved from Gentry Middle School to John Warner Middle School. You can see the big list of neighborhoods there. This includes the Cascades area. Gentry is overutilized, and this area took off a lot of the stress on Gentry Middle School back into John Warner. Next one. All right. This is probably only 15 homes, but this small area is moving from John Warner to Gentry Middle School. If we were to make the map ever so slightly bigger, that arrow is probably 200 yards away from actual Gentry Middle School. It is very, very close to them, and their only outlet is right on Knife On, you can see. So this one, it makes sense for them to go to Gentry. They're significantly closer. Next. All right, and then this area, again, we're moving from Gentry Middle School to John Warner, a small area that its only outlet is onto Knife On, but it's not called Knife On that side of the street. And there's 2 neighborhoods moving in that one. Go ahead and go to the next. All right, we're getting close to finish with our phase 2 changes. The first area is our phase 1 change, so moving from Fairview to Russell. This will occur in 25-26, as you've already approved. And then the other small area on the bottom right, this is showing West Boulevard to Russell Boulevard. A lot of neighborhoods, I think there are less students than neighborhoods in that area. Next one. All right, and this area is moving from West Middle School to Smithton Middle School. This was, again, for feeders so that Mary Paxton Keeley is no longer split. This area is also pretty close to Smithton Middle School. Next. Oh, no. This is a very, very small area along Banks Road. This would be moving to to Benton and to Jefferson Middle School. Again, if any students, it's very, very few moving. This is a neighborhood continuity change that we wanted to make. Next one. Maybe this is the last. This area, this is along Nature Lane, so this would be moving to from West Boulevard Elementary to Midway Heights, and then from West Middle to Smithton. The middle school changes, of course, with that feeder. We do not have any students impacted, but this boundary is currently along Nature Lane, and the request from the community feedback was they wanted the whole road to go to the same school. Again, I think there's only a 12th grader that lives here, so no students impacted today, but neighborhood continuity for the future. Next, I think that's it, yep. All right, so moving on to our phase 3 changes. Again, these are gonna kind of be stuck in the southwest corridor mostly. Go ahead. So this first one is from Cedar Ridge to New Haven. So we had to make that small New Haven change at the beginning. Now we can put students back in New Haven. Cedar Ridge is a school that we're going to need to watch. There are a lot of lots that are already platted without a home sitting on them in that area. I counted over 500. So a lot of them seem to be build your custom home on your custom lot type of homes, which is kind of promising because it gives us a little bit more time to plan, but that is an area that could grow significantly in the coming years. So this area right here is moving from Cedar Ridge to New Haven. We have 3 different neighborhoods impacted. Next one. Thank you, Noah. This area right here is moving from New Haven to Rockbridge Elementary. Again, New Haven was not fully relieved when we moved that part in phase 2, so we got to get them a little bit more relief. Next one, I think the next one is also, no, it's not. So this area is moving from Grant to Mill Creek. This is an area that we moved last time around, so they moved a couple years ago. Overwhelmingly from this community, we heard that they love Grant, but Mill Creek is a lot closer and it makes a lot more logistical sense for them. So this was kind of an easy one for us just because they wanted to go back, and it does make sense. They're right along Nifon. Next one. So these 2 areas right here currently go to Russell. They would be moved to Mill Creek. In this case, both are closer in proximity to Mill Creek. And Mill Creek is greatly relieved when we open the new Southwest Elementary School, so they have room to take these areas. Next. All right, so now we're moving on to the new Southwest Elementary School. This first area is really the area immediately surrounding the new elementary school, which would be moving from Mill Creek to the new Southwest Elementary. You can see all of the names there. Next. This area is moving from Rockbridge Elementary to the new Southwest Elementary School. And again, we already moved them in phase 2 from Gentry to John Warner. I just want to point out, this was one of the more difficult decisions in this process. I was really hoping to get definitive feedback one way or the other, either stay at Rockbridge, go to the new elementary school from the community. We didn't get it. I was really hoping to get it from the committee. We didn't get it. So we ended up defaulting back to the board guidelines and looking at those, and it was very difficult to justify keeping that area at Rockbridge Elementary when we look in comparative to those board guidelines. A lot of the feedback from folks that we heard from this area, they wanted to go to John Warner, but they also wanted to go to Rockbridge Elementary. So there was a little bit of conflicting feedback there. They wanted that proximity, but they wanted to stay at Rockbridge Elementary, and all I can say is Rockbridge Elementary is a very loved school. We heard that over and over. Next one. All right, and this is that section of Buell Ralph moving into the new Southwest Elementary School. It is pretty much everything on the south side of that boundary. That's a pretty big boundary. It does go into a nature preserve, so it's kind of artificially big because we're not going to have students living in there. But almost the entire south side of that boundary is going, and that greatly relieves Buell Ralph Elementary School, which is well needed. Buell Ralph is one of those funny schools that we can relieve. We relieve them every time we touch that boundary, and then they just creep back up. So that's probably another one to watch just because of the history of that occurring there. Next. All right. So this area on the top, we'll go to the top first. That is moving from Buell Ralph to Mill Creek. We don't have students living there today, but it really looks like an area that could be developed in the future, and we don't want all the development pointed at Buell Ralph. So that's the reasoning for the top one. The bottom one is moving from Mill Creek to Beulah Ralph. So this is in Creek's Edge. There are currently, it's a neighborhood continuity change. There's 2 parcels that front Kiowa Lane that are assigned to Mill Creek, even though everybody else on Kiowa Lane is assigned to Beulah. I got it wrong. There's 2 on Kiowa Lane assigned to Beulah, or to Mill Creek. The rest of Kiowa Lane is assigned to Beulah Ralph. So we're just correcting that. Everybody on Kiowa Lane will now go to Mill Creek. Or to Beulah Ralph. Oh my goodness, I cannot get that straight. Everybody on Kiowa Lane will go to Beulah Ralph Elementary. This doesn't impact any students. It's just trying to get that neighborhood continuity. This area down here, so this is that little peninsula of Fairview that currently exists. This is moving from Fairview to Russell Boulevard. In this case, we did make a change. No, this is to get rid of an ugly feeder split, a 1% feeder split. So by doing this, Fairview is now a single feeder school, and they move over to Russell Boulevard, who is a double. They're a 2-way feeder school, but it doesn't impact that close to 50-50 match we got there. Next one. So this area right here outlined in red, this is moving from Mary Paxton Keeley into Fairview. In phase 2, when we put that other peninsula, the new Russell Peninsula, into Fairview, it does leave Fairview a little bit underutilized, so we're trying to get that back. We also want to relieve Mary Paxton Keeley a little bit, so it kind of brings both of those back to center. Next one. Oh, and that's it. Sorry, that was a lot of slides. So, are there any questions? Yeah.
So in a sense of thinking about the changes from a simplistic timeline wise, you shared a lot to us. Majority of the northern part of our school district, elementary wise, and all of the middle school changes will go into effect for the 25-26 school year. And then majority of the southern elementary school changes of our district, they will go into effect for the 26-27 school year.
Yep.
That's not a perfect summarization, but I feel like it's a great way of just kind of simply putting it.
And if you're curious, so on this sheet, and I think folks have it already, on the bottom of this, I did put a QR code. We already have the locator up and running, so folks can type in their address and it'll tell you where you are in where you are currently, phase 2 and phase 3. So there's no confusion there, or less confusion. Go ahead, Jean.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
I did see you come in.
I've been traveling for 24 hours, so hopefully this is coherent, like when I asked my
From
question.
Israel to the board meeting.
From the airport.
It was a
to the
long
board.
commute.
It was like, it's okay. Okay, so I know one of the pieces of feedback we had gotten in some of the meetings, and I know you were there too, was from people that were starting to look at the changes and were seeing that like when these changes happened because of the phasing, and they had to potentially do a pickup at like an elementary school and a middle school, that they were like kind of going like from one side of town and back to the other. Does this generally fix some of that? Is there a way to, like, I know it's hard to account for every single contingency, like that's probably something people have to like look, because we can't stick every address in, but just like generally speaking, by having those feeders sort of be 100% splits and like more of the 50-50 splits, that should fix some of that as well,
Yeah,
correct?
generally, yes. When I heard from folks who said that to me, it was more about sending students from Gentry to Battle High School, and having to somehow logistically get students to Battle, get them to Gentry, since they're on the other side of town, and there's none of that going on. For the most part, people are staying on like the same side of town for school.
All right, Karen, thank you so much for your all your work with this, and Mr. Ofield, you as well. Just to kind of recap the whole process, I mean, we did 9 open houses throughout this process, and at least 2 surveys, 3 surveys throughout the phase 1, and then, yeah. So there was a lot of community input, and and I'm really pleased with how transparent and collaborative it was. I thought the internal committee having representation from every single building, that was really important. So I'm pleased with the work that was put into it, and I feel like you've set the board up to make a really good decision. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Applause for Karen. We'll now have an update on the 24-25 organizational chart.
Okay, so as Dr. Wolf comes forward, because of the massive or the expanse of the organizational chart, we kept it at the director's level and above, instead of trying to drill down into the minutiae of it for right now, because again, we're just getting too expansive. We kept it at that director's level, executive director, and chief's level and above.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent. I'm going to provide a brief update of the 24-25 CPS organizational chart. I'm only going to highlight the additions and the changes. Like Dr. Yearwood had mentioned, this organizational chart that's here before you only includes executive directors, directors, and site administrators. We will have a more comprehensive organizational chart on the district website, so that will be available as well. So there are two categories, the headers of academics and operations. Our focus is on academic achievement, and operations does support that mission. So the next slide, so the changes under academics, Chiefs of Schools is on a special assignment focusing on themed schools. And under the Chief Academic Officer, we have moved the Columbia Area Career Center. We'll move from operations to academics. So then the Director of the Career Center will be under the Chief Academic Officer, directly under the Executive Director of School Improvement. And the new position of Director of Workforce Development will be under the Chief Academic Officer as well, under the Executive Director of School Improvement, so that there's that continuity. This change is to emphasize the academic programming and support provided to our scholars. And then also under the Chief Academic Officer, the new position of Executive Director of Special Services will be underneath and the Director position. And at this time, we will not be hiring the Assistant Director of Special Services. That position will not be filled. Also under the Chief Academic Officer, the Executive Director of Elementary Education, Executive Director of Secondary Education, and the Director of Elementary Education will be under the Chief Academic Officer, along with principals, assistant principals, gifted education, preschool, and parents as teachers. And then on the next slide, under operations, as I previously stated, the Career and Technical Education, the Columbia Area Career Center, will be moving to academics. And then also underneath my position, Chief Human Resource Officer, is a new position, Director of Human Resources for Classified and Operations. And we are eliminating the Assistant Director for Human Resources. So those are the changes and additions.
Any questions? Mr. Willoughby.
Yeah, I was curious if y'all could explain a little bit deeper the place. I understood the moving of the Director of CTE, right, and moving it underneath the umbrella of the Chief Academic Officer as a whole, and I wholeheartedly believe in that. I was curious around it being underneath the Executive Director of School Improvement, and part of that, the reason why I'm asking this question is because how the Career Center works very much is almost like a secondary school, right? And the majority of who the CTE is being provided to is that main campus near Rockbridge, and then also our ancillary areas in each of the high schools as well. And so my concern is just the fact that with the Director of CTE not being underneath the Executive Director of Secondary Education is that there won't be cross-conversation and strong supports provided to our students in the way that that can work, because of how, in many ways, the Director of CTE, yes, as a director, while also almost being like a secondary principal, right, of the Career Center building itself. And so I'm just curious if you could explain a little bit deeper, anyone
Yeah.
staff for that placement.
I know one of the reasons is that we're looking at not just keeping CTE at the secondary level, but really starting to impact CTE starting at the elementary level and then ramping it up. So that way our elementary scholars would have an idea of what careers are out there, what are the possibilities that are out there. Our middle schoolers would also have the same experience and then on to secondary. So by being under school improvement, they touch all areas, including elementary, middle, and high school. So we didn't want to just keep it or continue to keep it only at the secondary level, because we want all schools to be touched by this as we move forward with our initiatives and, you know, as we look at improving our workforce development, getting our scholars to understand what are the possibilities out there for them in careers and really starting at a younger age. We wanted to expand that.
I would add that in addition, this team of executive directors is truly a collaborative team. So meeting at minimum on a weekly basis, but far more often than that, with collaborative issues. In fact, the exact discussion about the importance of having our executive director of school improvement and our executive director of secondary education meeting together on a couple of different topics, including the specific one, was actually part of the conversation today. And so I'm not at all concerned that our executive director of secondary education is going to be out of the loop or uninvolved in these critical conversations related to their person.
And I just want to say, because I know our executive director is back there, this is nothing about any of you individually. This is just thinking about like just org chart wise of like how it goes. And I mean, it was one of those things that I know in the past, CTE folks, are educators and staff are very happy that's going underneath the chief academic officers now, right? And going into the academic space. And I just don't want it to be forgotten that it is an academic powerhouse in this district. I mean, we are constantly awarded for our CTE stuff. So I just pleasing with that.
Ms. Snodgrass.
Can you speak up, Jean, because Paul
No.
can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Paul. I was wondering if you could talk a little more, and this is not in any way, again, like about Dr. Klein's ability or Dr. Porter's ability or like the incredible work that both are doing. And I understand that Dr. Porter has sort of a special assignment. It sounds so very fancy. But I'm curious because I know in many of the places we've been told that the reason we need to have someone added in or we need to add another position is to help alleviate the strain that comes from a single person having responsibility in terms of trying to do supervision for too large a group. And so I'm wondering if you could explain a little more why the split has been made the way it is, or why the split wouldn't be kept between chief of schools overseeing some, chief academic officer seeing some in the org chart, with then temporarily the shift happening the other way. Just so that we're not coming back next year to have to vote on another version of the org chart.
Absolutely. Let's start off with the shift to special assignment. Right now, we have not really paid attention to our schools and how can we structure our schools in such a manner that they're more appealing to our young scholars. How can we ensure that our programs and the things that we're doing within our schools are more attractive to our scholars? And so we are looking at developing what do you call our theme schools, and that's a massive overhaul. That's basically having a school sort of rethink or rebrand itself around certain specific programs. And to be able to do that, we must be able to research it, we must be ensure that there's buy-in, we must make sure there's training, and the magnitude that we're looking at about, how many themes do we talk about, Dr. Porter? 5 themes that we're looking at this year, which would impact about 10 schools to start off with. And this is just a start. And if we don't do this right, moving in, what I've seen is it will crumble. So we're asking Dr. Porter, because of the level of expertise, to ensure that there's research behind it, ensure that there's communication, ensure that basically there's training that will allow us to sustain, because we don't want to go down a pathway and talk to our parents, talk to our scholars, talk to our teachers, and get everyone excited, and then all of a sudden it crumbles. It's very, very heavy-duty task-oriented. So with that, there couldn't be basically distractors. It couldn't be dueling roles. It couldn't be multiple roles happening. And while at the same time, we had to ensure that we continued on the academic progress that we are making. So what has happened in the past is, for example, you'd have one person overseeing 22 elementary schools, one person overseeing the 13 or so secondary schools. Now we have the executives, we have the directors that are now have now been structured into certain lanes. And not only are they structured into lanes, but now there's even a chance of greater collaboration between the academics and the schools as we look at moving this forward. So that's a lot of the sort of philosophy research that we're going into it, and I encourage Dr. Porter or Dr. Klein, if you want to chime in and add any pieces that you feel welcome to.
Well, Gina, I was just going to say, I mean, Dr. Klein has impressed us with his brilliance in many ways, but he's only been here for a couple weeks, and so I'll still be working with him to make sure that this continuity still continues. He won't just be like, well, you're on your own, buddy.
Yeah, no. I guess if I can ask a follow-up to that, which is just, what is your vision for how this supervision would be redistributed after the special assignment is over?
Yeah, it's way too early to say that, and the reason that I say that is, you know, once we get to a point where there's true fidelity in planning, in implementation, and there's success, then we will come back and reconvene and we'll look at that. But right now, we are just starting. Right now, we are sort of blind in the processes that we need to exist. We've got to research. Dr. Porter is going to spend time traveling and going out to schools and examining what are the best programs and what worked, what didn't work, and so on. So we have to make sure that we get it right. The key is to be successful and get it right. And if, you know, as we talk through this, Dr. Porter shares, look, I need a little more time to get this done, then we'll have to basically accommodate that.
So when it's done, how do you anticipate redistributing the supervision?
Okay, so that question, I can't predict. Right now, you're asking me to predict a year from now or 2 years from now what can happen.
So I guess I'll just clarify. So okay. I'm asking because when the change to chief of schools and chief academic officer was first approved, and I don't disagree with, I don't know if I was there or not, but I think we did need a change in organizational structure. Part of the rationale had to do with the split, the continuity, but also the split in terms of the focus that one person could be focused on some of the curriculum and someone could be focused on kind of the elementary and secondary, like the continuity that was running through. And so I guess I'm just wondering if you were very passionate about why some of that split had to happen. Yes. And so do you feel differently now, or do you anticipate that a split will again happen later?
Well, we have 727 on our doorsteps right now. And there's a predictive value that goes along with that in the loss of our scholars. And if we are not prepared to have these programs and these themes and have our schools become much more attractive, then the conversation will change, because now we're going to be talking about losing 2 and 3 and 4 and 500 of our scholars. It happens. So
you feel like this is a better structure than what you previously proposed and argued for?
Yes, for right now.
Okay.
Yes, for right now.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
I have, I think, 2 things. And I don't know if this is a question for you, Michelle, or someone else, but when we do publish the org chart online, can we have the names of the people in these positions? It is just simply easier for the public to be able to, and frankly for me, I've had to ask people before, who is that? Or try to search by the title. So if we could have that, that would be great.
I'll send you the link.
Okay. And then,
There
is
are
it
two
there
org
now?
charts. Yeah,
I mean,
there are
it has.
two org charts. The one that just has the titles and no names, and then there's another one you can access that has specific names.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
usually go to the search bar and type in org chart and click on whatever comes up. So, okay, so we have two different org charts online, basically. Okay. Okay. Then I guess I kind of want to echo a little bit of what Jean said. My concern is that, and of course I was not on the board at the time, but the curriculum audit recommended this change to add chief of schools and chief academic officer for the reasons that Jean outlined, to divide up the academics and operational kind of structures of the school. And that just went into effect this school year, and now we're looking at taking, I understand Helen's gonna be on a special assignment that is going to take a lot of time, but you know, the board before said, okay, yeah, this is what we need to do. That's what we told the public we needed to do, and now we're saying, oh, no, we can take everything away, all the reporting responsibilities away from Dr. Porter and put them on one person that started 2 weeks ago. And I just wonder, I think, not nature schools, but the theme schools are a good way to differentiate ourselves as we set up for the charter schools coming aboard. But I'm also concerned about being able to address our achievement, and are we spreading ourselves a little too thin in a lot of different areas? I think, so anyway, I think I echoed a little bit of what Jean said, and I don't know if you have anything new to add to that. I just wanted to share my concerns with that.
One new piece to that.
Okay.
I think, you know, it's an interesting thing, principal supervision and curriculum supervision. They both seem like a lot, and so it's tempting to want to have them separated, and I understand the rationale of that. But on a day-to-day basis, the principals are the ones supervising the execution of what's happening in classrooms and in schools. And the more alignment we can have between our curricular and our academic work and the day-to-day work and responsibility of supervising principals, their evaluations, everything that goes into being a school leader, there's a significant advantage in ensuring that work is happening. Fidelity to what we got planned, implementation of curriculum that we've written and the board approved. So there, you know, it definitely is always a balance, and so I'm it's definitely not saying it's not a challenge to look at supervision of multiple functions, but the value when that's done of having all those functions being really well aligned is great in terms of outcomes for scholars.
Yeah, and I think you explained it very well, because I know when this change first happened, and I really was having a hard time wrapping my head around what does Dr. Porter in charge of in different schools, and what is Mr. Moore in charge of in different schools, and I had a really hard time wrapping my head around that. So you do make a good point with that. I mean, that piece makes sense.
I'll echo what Dr. Porter said at the very beginning. Again, I don't have here in a couple weeks, as you mentioned.
Right.
But love working with the whole team in general. Dr. Porter is fantastic, and we will continue to collaborate, because you probably get that also theme schools is something that I'll want to be a part of.
Right.
There's a lot of collaboration and sharing of things are going to happen between the two of us.
Well, we should all be sharing.
There you go.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for accepting the challenge. It's a monumental
Can you
challenge.
speak up, Alvin? I don't think
I
that
just
all
said
can hear you.
thanks for accepting the challenge of the theme schools. It is a monumental challenge. Question for you though is, were there any data, were there any other districts that's doing this? Or was this completely created within the CPS?
There are multiple districts that are doing different themes and are doing it well, and they've basically shown to be successful, and those are the schools that Dr. Porter will be researching and traveling to, taking teams. What we're hoping is they'll take administrators, take teachers there to sit and to really learn and embrace themselves in the different theme processes. So yes, that there are schools out there that have done this and have done extremely well. I'll be honest, I was also a principal of a theme school where we were at the bottom, an F, and turned into an A+ school and had a waiting list of 100 scholars plus to get into the school, you know, and it was a very high poverty school, but because of our fine arts theme, we excelled. And so, yes, and I know of other schools that have actually done this, and those that have done it with fidelity and done it well, you'll be amazed at not only the academic performance because of the motivation of the scholars, that's the parental involvement, just the whole branding of the school that changes completely. Yeah.
And remember, Mr. Hobbs, we're already doing this. We have Benton STEM, we have Jefferson STEAM, we have Locust Fine Arts. So we already have schools that are operationalized. We're just taking those, make sure their brand is solid, make sure their core is solid, and expanding on that idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think theme schools is going to be an interesting thing to do. I like the thematic schools that we have, so it's going to be cool to see the advancement of that in those places and the addition in new spots. My concern is that, I mean, you like the good barbecue place in Kansas City, so I know you're a good guy. But it's but my concern.
That sealed the deal when we hired you.
My concern though is that full-time chief of schools, full-time chief academic officer. Now you're going to be doing both. Effectively, you're going to be doing both because we need Dr. Porter doing the thematic school things, and now you're doing both. You're doing both jobs. And at what point? Or is there going to be a point, or what's the trigger going to be when you're like, I need some help? And my fears is that you're going to have to pull, you know, one of our other executive directors out of their position to help you out in the other spots or whatever that are going to exist. Or are we going to need to end up having to hire an assistant, you know, chief academic officer to help you on this task while you're doing effectively both jobs at the same time? Is there going to be, you know, something that is going to happen, or are we going to get to a point where you're going to go, hey, look, I like working here, but there's only, you know, 24 hours in a day, and I need like 40 in a day to do this job correctly and accurately. We've established pretty well over the last couple of years, having the academic officer and the chief of schools, our principals, our families, our staff expect that, and now it's all on you. At what point do you think there's going to come a point, or what are you going to do when if it becomes too much of a thing?
Well,
I trust that you're going to be able to do it. We wouldn't have, you know, brought you on,
I
agreed to this, but it's like, you know, that's my concern.
So first of all,
Is that a question?
It's
for,
just
like,
all of the above, you know, just, you know.
if you don't mind, I can actually address a bit, unless it's up to you, Dr. Yearwood.
No, please. Yes.
So
I can add, but go ahead.
I can speak to, you know, a couple days of experience in here. Fortunately, though, I have 9 years of experience as an assistant superintendent, in which I supervised essentially the same set of functions. So it's a different district. Every district is different, and I'm not naive enough to think that just because you did something in one place means that it's the same. It is not. But it gives me a window of what can be done there. And one thing I know for sure is it requires a really, really solid executive director team. With an average executive director team, it would be very difficult to do. So my confidence comes from a couple weeks and some great feedback from the rest of the team telling me that this is a solid, strong team. That's been my impression. Because of that, that means that I actually, when you look at the functions then within this role, I'm not managing all those functions. I'm working with this team of people to support those functions. And I know, quite a bit about them, and I'm involved, but I'm not having to be the one who's micromanaging all those pieces. And so the quality of that team, which I do believe we really do have great folks, is what makes that a possibility. That's my response to that, given my experience so far.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think just from hearing what my colleagues have shared and things of that nature, listening to what y'all have responded in staff, I mean, it sounds like in a summary kind of way of where we're at and with this information there. And I would agree, as I've shared with you, Dr. Yearwood, I don't want us to lose, you alluded to this, I don't want us to lose on the fact of the work that we're trying to do academically with the shift of moving into the direction that you're wanting to go for the special assignment for right now. And so I think maybe potentially for us as a team, for us, it sounds like we might need some more clarity on how this is gonna work and look. And maybe that's where it goes, like maybe some explanation in a Friday report or in future around just kind of like, what does the immediacy look like? Dr. Porter and Dr. Klein, you both alluded to some form of like collaboration even throughout, in that sense of like when I heard that, what I envisioned, right, is like, oh yeah, Helen might be off I don't know, in some state, right? And something pops up and Adam, your name just popped in my head first, sorry. Adam came in and was talking with Dr. Klein around some stuff, and Dr. Klein, you're like, I don't know, and being able to call Helen. So that's kind of what I kind of envisioned when you kind of alluded to that, but I think us having a stronger understanding of like, is that the case, or what does that look like, how long does that function, I think might be good for us. I think Ms. Snodgrass sharing that space of like, what does the future look like after special assignment, and potentially, and I get Dr. Yearwood, you sharing that you don't have something right now, but I think maybe as we continue going forward, having some options, almost like maps, attendance areas, right? Like here's the 8 options that could possibly be the thing right now, right? And as we get closer and narrow it down, maybe that's where we go, right? And then I also hear kind of like that concern of division of labor. I think Dr. Klein, you provided a good answer to that, and from me sharing that concern too. But I think us just continuing to have a clear understanding as we move into this direction might be really good, because that's just what I'm hearing. And it's things that I share, but I think it's just kind of, it's a different thing that we're doing, that y'all are wanting to go down, Dr. Yearwood, where you're wanting to go down with your team. And we have some, we're worried. It's something different, and we're a little worried about what that might look like. And so I think having continued clarification as we continue moving forward probably would be good.
You're gonna go, okay. No, I was gonna ask that, based on what you're saying, just in a little different way, because, again, and I apologize, to me this is new, okay? My question is, how long do you think it's gonna take before you actually know exactly what each role is and how much effort it's gonna take on each one of those roles? Because right now, and I think that this is what Blake was saying, right now, I certainly don't, and I don't know if you guys really know exactly how much, what this is really gonna look like in the end, but you kind of know what it should look like. Right. But in actuality, it may take a few months or a year or whatever to get all of these pieces in place to get you the success that you want.
Yeah. It will take us a year to really develop training, develop programs. It's going to take. We're giving ourselves a long runway, because when you try things too quickly, all of a sudden it's going to fall short. And we're being very purposeful in making sure that we are planning adequately for this. I've done this work before. This is not new work to me. I've done it multiple times. As a matter of fact, as an assistant super, I had eight executive directors under me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And we were very successful because of the level of collaboration. Like Dr. Klein says, when you have a team of individuals that are working together, right, your level of success is there. So it's not something that, again, I'm just trying. It's something that I've known, something I've done, and we just have to be very, very purposeful on how we are implementing, because when you start looking at initiatives and putting new initiatives in place, if you move too quickly, it falters. If you move too slowly, it falters. And there are very different variables that you consider in terms of, it has, what's the knowledge behind this? How do we acquire knowledge? How do we impart knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So we've given ourselves this year in particular to study, to set up, to make sure there's fidelity. And the second year is when we are moving to implementation. And we expect to see a greater level of success with that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Dr. Ford?
No, thank you. I think we have a really good foundation based on our work from last year, and that gives me, say hope, that's not the right word. That gives me courage and a belief in the credibility of our team, for which I am grateful.
Confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone needs removed for separate consideration? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I see Paul raising his hand.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. We will move on to new business. And the first thing is the consideration of the attendance area changes. Is there a motion to approve the changes as presented earlier?
So moved.
Second.
Give it to April. Give it to April.
Yes.
All right, this will be a roll call vote.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can ask
Sorry.
a question.
This is really more for just, I guess this is also for maybe Karen and in the past, there had been some discussion about for changes, like if we approve this and we know now like when the different elementary schools are going to be shifting their boundaries, specifically thinking about children that would be starting kindergarten next year. We've discussed various options, right? Potentially they could start at the school where they would be going. I don't know if that goes 2 years out to, like, I don't know. But obviously we're also already in summer and getting close to the start of the school year. And so I just wanted to see if this was something, I know we had some numbers from before, but we didn't have a final plan. If this is approved, is that the type of information that we can get relatively quickly if we want to try to be able to address some of that prior to the start of the school year in case some of our families might want those options, if the numbers even allow us to make those offers. I understand that's not a set thing.
I can get that to you by the end of the week. The only difficult part with any sort of like exemptions or phasing or anything like that is I don't think we have a new kindergarten class yet, so we'll just have to assume that we'll have a similar number as we do today. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, I've discussed with Mr. Ofield that like after we approve or not approve this recommendation, then like kind of the next step is discussing our like grandfathering and the numbers and all that kind of stuff.
So I think because things don't go into effect till not this next year, but the following year, I'm actually thinking more of the kindergartners potentially, or maybe ninth grader. Do you know, or ninth graders aren't an issue, never mind, because we're not switching that. That's not an option.
Yeah.
But you know, like the incoming people more so than the people that would stay after a change was made, because we have more time to consider that because the change doesn't happen for another year or 2 years. Sorry. And I apologize if the discussion happened in some way
Not
before
today.
I got here.
No, it's not
or
today.
while I was gone.
I just want to clarify, so you're concerned about the kindergartners that are entering this coming August, and then if they were to have to move in 25, 26.
Right.
So yeah, so if you're going to Fairview for kindergarten this year, but then the next year your line's changing, you're not going to go to Russell, you should just start at Russell this year.
Or the parents,
Or you
could the
parents
parents
have
have the option
Correct,
to
yeah.
choose that?
Yeah.
Whoa, we would have to talk about that in, like, we would have to decide that in August.
Yeah.
Yes, that was my.
That's the next point, we can decide it, is August. unless we have a special session, because we don't have another meeting scheduled between now and the next August session. We don't have a work session in July. So we kind of knew going into this whole timeline that we were going to be making a final decision tonight. So
that kind of thing has been handled in two different ways over the last several years.
okay.
In, I believe it was 2014-15, and then again 2016-17, there were actually policies written by the policy committee related to some boundary changes. In 2019, when we did the secondary shift for the opening of John Warner in 2020, that was an internal procedure or process that administration put together, is my understanding. There was no policy. So what I'm saying is I don't know, depending on, I suppose, the will of the board and conversations with Dr. Yearwood. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not positive it would be something that we would necessarily need to approve as a board. I think that just requires, I think whatever it is needs to be decided swiftly. But I'm just putting out the historical,
For this
the way
year's
it's been
incoming
handled.
kindergartners, yes.
Right.
But it can't be decided right now in this.
Correct. No.
Yes,
sorry. No, it's
So
just
I think the first thing we're gonna need is numbers
Information, yeah.
of enrolled, where kindergarten enrollment is for this year. Mr. Willoughby.
Yeah,
And then I'll.
this is that thing that I brought up when we were making that decision around phase one and looking at it and wanting us to kind of try not to make this decision in July, but I understood why we got to this point of making it in July, right? I would really recommend, if we are leaning towards trying to do something like that, us holding a special session this month at some point to make that decision. Because I would say waiting until August to get that information, that is a quick turnaround for families. So.
Agree.
Okay.
And schools.
Just a comment. CPS has done a very, very good job of handling and resolving those situations in the past on an individual basis. And looking at the process that found that I'm on the board that you guys have gone through with this, I don't foresee that there's going to be an overwhelming amount of people that's not going to be happy. And so lots of the times, even back a few years ago, we were able to come in and they were able to make the change on an individual basis, and several people in the community were very happy with it. But I do understand the concern. If there's like 30,000 people that needs to come to change, then you can make some set rules. But I think that public schools has done a very good job on an individual basis and based upon medical reasons or whatever. So, okay, I just wanted to make that statement, that's all.
Okay, well, we'll look for that data later this week, and then Mr. Ofield, maybe you and John and I can get together and kind of talk about a strategy for getting this wrapped up. So we have a motion and a second to approve the changes as presented. Any other discussion? Looks like a roll call vote.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Varad?
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yep.
Ms. Wax?
Yes. All right, the attendance area changes have been unanimously approved. Next, we have the consideration of the KBC Behavioral Healthcare Education Services Residential Education Agreement. This is for first read and discussion. Are there any questions? This will be approved then in August, or up for approval in August. If there are any questions between now and August, please send them to Dr. Yearwood. All right, and then are there any questions about the KBC Behavioral Health Day Treatment? Okay, so again, that'll be up for approval in August. The consideration of construction agreements, engagements, and change orders. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions? All right, roll call vote.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cobbins?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Herber?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Mr. Langman?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. All right, board member announcements. We have another listening session coming up, not until August 29th, but that will be at Battle High School.
No.
No.
Douglas.
Douglas High School.
That's 5:30.
Douglas High School at 5:30. I said it wrong. And there will be more information about that on our website when we, it's August 29th at 5:30 at Douglas. And that'll be Mr. Cobbins and myself will be the board members there. And I think, Ms. Brown, are you going to be there also?
Yes.
Okay. You're a listener.
Well, no, I'm a talker, but.
Okay.
Yes.
Are any other board announcements? I'm on the radio tomorrow. Probably talking about boundary changes. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.